Welcome to Let's Roger That. I'm Gilles. This is part 2 of working on the motor assembly for my 1944 SouthBend 13 lathe. The first part of this video covered the removal of the whole assembly, and the whole idea here is that I'm doing it without cutting that nice shiny belt that I got from Albino down in New York. I managed to do that, so I'm going to show you how we put it back together, but of course without boring you with all the fine detail. I'm going to give you some tips that came in handy for me. I didn't record everything because there were too many expletives from some of the challenges involved in this thing. So without further ado, let's get to it. First thing to do here is to fabricate a bearing press. So this is going to be a press that is completely portable and might help me install bearings while under the motor assembly. Let's put a punch mark in the middle. We'll drill this out. This is a nice handy little tool. There we go. And now put a punch mark in there. There we go. Okay, now I'm drilling the 5/8 hole to accept the bolt. And there you have it. Okay, time to put theory into practice. So this was in the freezer for about an hour. We'll see what happens. Okay, one side is sort of recessed, so go with the one that's completely even. This here sits perfectly in here, it's a 3-inch, call it. Screw it in. Okay, line this up correctly. You can tell, sorry, I can already tell it's going to go in nicely. Okay, so just gotta make sure it's nice and straight. That's the most important part. That's it, and just nice and easy. Look at that. Go in perfectly. There we go. And that should be it. See, it's nice and flat there. Okay, so that retainer is going to go here, and that'll be that. The rest will be done underneath the lathe, so it shouldn't be a whole lot of fun. As it comes to your bearing press, one note that I should mention is that this here has to be perfectly flat and very centered as well, okay, so that as you press, it presses everything nice and even and keeps everything centered. All right, so that's very important to do that when you build this thing. Okay. Okay, I'll put on the retainer ring. Okay, so we're ready to start putting things back together here for the SouthBend 13. And of course, a few minutes ago I pressed that one bearing in there. on the one side, which is this side, right? So the casting that's going to hold the cone pulley goes in through the left side. You can't put it through here or the right. So remember, my goal was to save this drive belt all along. That was it. Save 150 bucks. So I left the motor in, didn't want to disassemble anything else. So what I've done is I've constructed a scaffold of sort made of wood. It's just stacked wood. And the next thing I need to do is bring the cone pulley in, put it in there. The only way to actually make it fit inside the casing is to slide it in this way, where there's no bearing on this side. Slide it in, set it down. Now remember, we're going to fit this belt around the shaft on this side. So what I did is I polished the end, took out any kind of burrs on the shaft itself, and it's in the freezer, so it's going to slide in nice and easy when it's time to press the other bearing in there. So that's what's next. Okay, so I let this shaft sit in overnight. Look how easy it slides in, okay? Very nice. Now one thing, please don't forget, put lines wherever those dimples are, and align this or this way here so that you know where to stop pushing in the shaft, okay? So that it's easy to line up the set screws. Fair few things that you need to do before we get really excited here, okay? Firstly, the retainer ring needs to go in the casting first. So before you do anything else, you have to do that. You can't do it after the fact. So we're going to do that now. Could have done that on the bench if I wasn't smart enough. So hopefully that'll save you some headaches. We'll learn from each other, huh? So that's done. Now, that shaft is really cold, so make sure you wear some gloves. No time to be a hero. Here comes the hard part. Gotta put that in there and get the shaft in. So I think what I'm going to do simply is put the cone pulley in there first and try it out. Let's see what happens. Alright, here we go. That'll be easier. Okay. Now, I'm going to put the shaft in here. I put the belt in, as you saw. Shaft is through on that side. Put the bolt in on the other side. And there we go. That's sort of lined up. Move things around a touch. Now, the bearing, the shaft has to be pressed into the bearing. So we're going to do that using these. These are the screws that go, the bolt. These are the nuts that go in anyway. We need to, the shaft is pressing on the inner race of the bearing. So this here washer, which belongs there, is going to press against the inner race and pull the shaft through. That's the idea. So at this point, you need a little bit of room to work. See, I'm able to turn this, so that's okay, right? Now, we're going to start with one nut. Okay, so this is a 1 1/16 socket. Alright, here's my shorter socket coming up. Right here, that should work. Now, hold that shaft somehow. So that's not working out great. Lovely. Good. some point this is going to get harder. So what I'm going to do is get a screwdriver to put in there. Give me a little bit of leverage to hold it. Alright, see if that fits. It won't be perfect, but that's okay. I can see the shaft being pulled in, so that's a good sign. And it's not hard because that shaft was in the freezer overnight. Doesn't need to be overnight. An hour should do the trick for you. Coming in very nicely. And at some point it'll just seat there. There's no damage being caused. All the pressure's on the inner race. One spot, nothing else. There we go. It's seated. Remember, when you do this, never over tighten the bearing. Okay. So now, need to tighten the lock nut. So you gotta hold this, the inner one, something. And just lock it in place. That's it, done. Now comes the real tough part. The shaft is still cold. Need to press that bearing in there. Okay, so this got to go in here. This will be fun, I promise. Before I started all this, I made sure that everything was perfectly smooth. I won't have any problems pushing against the inner race. It's the outer race that's going to be tight this time, right? So I need to, right now I'm just lining it up by hand, which is nice, it fits perfectly. So now I need to have something that presses against the whole bearing from this side to go in. I already know that this is 2 inches, and I got to go as far as that bearing holder, that race. Okay, so we got to come up with something to do that. This shaft is about 1 inch or so. Not very good planning on my part. Measure this. That's 1 inch. Okay. Okay, so I've modified an old tool that I used a little while back on another project, and I just enlarged the hole to fit this shaft. So I know it's perfectly lined up. Now I just have to tap it in. Okay. There we are. Now, I need to make sure that outside race is getting its fair share of pounding here. I don't want to destroy another one. Looks all right. That's it. Okay, now it's time to put in these Allen screws and locking nut inside the cone pulley. Alright, so there's one. position of locking that up. Take your wrench, your tug on your Allen key. Now I'll put in those lock nuts. Turn the shaft again. Don't expect any of this stuff to be easy, but you can do it. If you take your time, you can do anything. Just be patient. Think. There we are. Done. All right. Some of you might be a little tiny bit disappointed, but there was so much activity that would not fit public consumption that I decided not to edit that in. So, okay, I managed to do all this, saving my belt, which was the whole point of the exercise, and I saved myself 150 bucks. Now, there are tricks that you need to take into account, and I'm going to list them out right now. So, the first thing is that if you don't disconnect the motor and remove it, and you do like me, you're going to have, some difficulties ahead of you. Let's be real here. So firstly, the cone, I attached that after the fact, right? Remember? And then this pulley here, the big pulley, was not attached yet. And before you actually put the shafts that hold this whole assembly, the upper assembly, that's when you need to install this big pulley right here. All right, so don't forget that. Now another little trick, mark a line where the hole is. Don't struggle like I did. And then you'll have, this has to be pounded in. You'll be okay. It won't damage the bearings. There's nothing in the way. And then put the pin in there. Once you have that done, that's when you start putting those pivot pins in. So you start with the one for the upper assembly, and then you put in the one for the lower assembly. All right. Then, once you've got that done, you'll have to connect the lower motor assembly to the cone pulley assembly. These bolts actually screw in to this casting. Same thing on the other side, right? So the one little trick is when you actually screw this bolt into this casting, because it's going this way, just wiggle this a little bit as you do that, and you'll find it'll do the world of a difference for you. You'll be able to feel your way until it's seated correctly at the correct spot. Of course, you'll have to adjust for your own machine and the length of belt that you have, but that is it. So I'm hoping this helped someone that was perhaps in the same situation I was in. If you have bearings, great. I had to wait 2.5 weeks for those darn bearings, and they cost me nearly $200. So for 3. Okay, so Old Faithful is all reassembled. I've got the base all closed up, and let's start her up. You'll see she's nice and quiet. My lathe has never been that quiet. So changing 2 bearings makes a big difference. Worth the $200 that it cost me. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode of Let's Roger That. Cheers.